In this video, we shall discuss Emily Bronte's masterpiece, Wuthering Heights. Now, Emily Bronte, or Ellis Bell, was born on the year of 1818, and she was one of the three Bronte sisters. Emily, best known for her novel Wuthering Heights, is a fascinating figure in English literature. Her one and only novel, Wuthering Heights, is a highly imaginative work, although it did not have a favorable reception. Wuthering Heights delves into themes of passion, revenge, class conflict, and the destructive power of love. Now, to discuss about the novel, we need to have general understanding about the characters. In this particular novel, the characters are so confusing because there are three generations of characters. Let's just talk about the characters first. In the novel, there are two houses within 4 miles, Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. Let's just take a look at the members of Wuthering Heights first. Earnshaw family resides in Wuthering Heights. Mr. Earnshaw. Mr. Earnshaw is the owner of Wuthering Heights. He has 2 children, his son Hindley and daughter Catherine. Heathcliff. The main protagonist, Heathcliff, is an orphan. He will be brought to Wuthering Heights by Mr. Earnshaw. Mr. Earnshaw favors him more than his own children. Heathcliff is a rough-skinned and black-haired child who is looked down upon by almost everyone. Ellen Dean, or Nellie Dean. Nellie Dean is the chief narrator of the novel. She grew up alongside Hindley and Catherine. She is the housekeeper of Earnshaw family. The novel is narrated from her point of view, and another narrator is Mr. Lockwood. Lockwood is a gentleman who rents Thrushcross Grange from Heathcliff. Nellie Dean tells him about all the characters and happenings of Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange. There are also some servants in Earnshaw family. Among them is the cantankerous servant Joseph. These are the members of Earnshaw family. On the other hand, there is Linton household, who resides in Thrushcross Grange. In Thrushcross Grange live Mr. and Mrs. Linton with their 2 children, Edgar Linton and Isabella Linton. Now, these are the characters we initially discover. There will be a 3rd generation of characters. Cathy Linton. Cathy is the daughter of Edgar Linton and Catherine Earnshaw. Hareton Earnshaw. Hareton is the son of Hindley and his wife Frances. Linton is a frail child. He is the son of Heathcliff and Isabella Linton. The characters are rather confusing, but now that we have known their names and basic details, it will be helpful to understand the plot of the novel. Take a quick look at the family tree. In the late winter of 1801, a man named Lockwood rented a manor called Thrushcross Grange in the remote moorlands of England. Initially, he pays a visit to his grim landlord, Heathcliff, at his remote moorland farmhouse, Wuthering Heights, located 4 miles away from Thrushcross Grange. There he encounters some weird people. Among them were a reserved young woman named Cathy Linton, a cantankerous servant Joseph, and Hareton, a rough-spoken young man. He found it weird that Heathcliff, a very wealthy man residing in this old manor of Wuthering Heights, amidst the wild, stormy landscape. So Lockwood, after returning to Grange, asks his housekeeper, Nellie Dean, to share the story of Heathcliff and the peculiar residents of Wuthering Heights. Nellie agrees, and Lockwood records her narrative in his diary, which becomes the main part of Wuthering Heights. Nellie's story begins. Nellie recalls her childhood when she worked as a housekeeper at Wuthering Heights for Mr. Earnshaw and his family. One day, Mr. Earnshaw returns from Liverpool with an orphan boy named Heathcliff, whom he decides to raise alongside his own children, Hindley and Catherine. At first, both children resent Heathcliff, who has rough skin and dark hair, but Catherine soon grows fond of him, and they become inseparable, spending their time playing on the moors. Earnshaw soon grows closer to Heathcliff, favoring him over his own son. But Hindley continues to treat Heathcliff harshly, so Mr. Earnshaw sends Hindley away to college and keeps Heathcliff at Wuthering Heights. After 3 years, when Mr. Earnshaw dies, Hindley inherits Wuthering Heights and, in everyone's surprise, returns with a wife named Frances. He immediately begins to mistreat Heathcliff. He, who once was a favored son, is now treated like a servant. However, Heathcliff maintains his friendship with Catherine, and one night they visit Thrushcross Grange to tease the Linton children. That means Edgar and Isabella Linton. There, Catherine is bitten by a dog and stays at the Grange for some weeks, where she is taught to be a proper lady. And when she returns, she is already attracted to Edgar Linton, and her relationship with Heathcliff becomes more complicated. That means Heathcliff finds Catherine getting closer to Edgar than him. After Francis dies, Hindley becomes an alcoholic and treats Heathcliff even worse. Catherine, wanting to improve her social status, gets engaged to Edgar Linton, even though she loves Heathcliff. Heathcliff leaves Wuthering Heights for 3 years after knowing this. Now this is a kind of interval situation for the novel. Heathcliff comes to know that Catherine, the one and only person who he thought used to love him, is now of someone else's. When Heathcliff returns, he immediately seeks revenge on those who wronged him. Having acquired a mysterious fortune, he cunningly lends money to the alcoholic Hindley, fully aware that Hindley will sink deeper into debt and despair. Soon, Hindley dies, and Heathcliff inherits Wuthering Heights. He also secures a claim to Thrushcross Grange by marrying Isabella Linton, sister of Edgar Linton. Now, all these are part of Heathcliff's revenge plan. He does not marry Isabella out of love. He lures her to fall into his love. Thereby, even after the refusal of all her family members, she fled with Heathcliff to marry him. Catherine and Isabella are two very interesting women. Catherine's biggest mistake was her decision of not marrying Heathcliff, and on the contrary, Isabella committed the greatest mistake by marrying Heathcliff. Heathcliff will treat her cruelly. Meanwhile, Catherine falls ill, gives birth to a daughter, and dies. The child is named after her. She is called Cathy Linton. Soon after, Isabella, out of Heathcliff's harsh treatment, escapes to London, where she gives birth to Heathcliff's son, whom she names Linton, after her family, and raises him there. After that, 13 years go by, during which Nellie Dean becomes the nursemaid to Catherine's daughter, also named Cathy, at Thrushcross Grange. Like her mother, young Cathy is beautiful and strong-willed. Cathy grows up at the Grange, unaware of Wuthering Heights. But one day, while exploring the moors, she stumbles upon the manor, meets Hareton, and they play together. Not long after, Isabella dies, and Linton is sent to live with Heathcliff. Heathcliff treats his own son even more harshly than he treated Isabella. Out of his vow for revenge, he becomes so beastly a man that he does not even spare his own son. Cathy encounters Heathcliff on the moors and soon visits Wuthering Heights to meet Linton, as she comes to know that Linton is one of her cousins. She and Linton start a secret romance, communicating solely through letters. When Nellie destroys Cathy's letters, she begins sneaking out at night to visit her frail lover, who pleads with her to nurse him back to health. However, it soon becomes clear that Linton is only pursuing Cathy under Heathcliff's pressure. Heathcliff wants Cathy to marry Linton so he can gain control of Thrushcross Grange and complete his revenge against Edgar Linton. Like I said, Heathcliff does not even spare the children from using in his tricks. As Edgar Linton's health declines and he approaches death, Heathcliff tricks Nellie and Cathy into returning to Wuthering Heights, where he holds them captive until Cathy agrees to marry Linton. Shortly after their marriage, Edgar dies, and soon after Edgar's death, follows Linton. Now with both Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange under his control, Heathcliff forces Cathy to live at Wuthering Heights, treating her like a common servant, while he rents Thrushcross Grange to Mr. Lockwood. Remember, everything we encountered till now is the story of Nellie Dean telling to Mr. Lockwood. Nellie's story concludes as she catches up to the present. Shocked by what he has heard, Lockwood ends his stay at Thrushcross Grange and returns to London. However, 6 months later, he visits Nellie again and learns what happened next. Initially, Cathy mocked Hareton for his ignorance and lack of education, but over time, as they lived together at Wuthering Heights, she grew to love him. Meanwhile, Heathcliff became increasingly obsessed with the memory of the elder Catherine, even speaking to her ghost. Everything around him reminded him of her. After a night spent wandering the moors, Heathcliff dies. Cathy and Hareton inherit both Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange, and they plan to marry on New Year's Day. After hearing the rest of the story, Lockwood visits the graves of Catherine and Heathcliff. So here the story of Wuthering Heights ends.